Okay, so hello again, and we are here in class, and today we are going to start with a quick review of the technique of the formula for remembering people's names. And as we learned last week, the formula is an acronym, GO-C-C-R. And GO-C-C-R actually stands for 5 different words. The G, who remembers what the G stands for? Get the name, correct. Get the name. Get the name. The O stands for?
Observe.
Observe the features, right. And we talked about all of the different features of somebody's face. What is it that makes one person's face different from another? And we want to observe the features. Now, let me tell you, sometimes the features that you're going to observe may not be flattering. Somebody may have, I don't know, a little bit of a deformity or something that they're uncomfortable about. They may have a broken tooth, or they may have bad skin, or they may have a scar or a birth defect or a mark on their face. You're not going to go up to them and go, "Hey, pal, let me tell you how I remember you." Nobody cares how you do it. They only care that you do it. So we're never going to make fun of people. We're going to have fun with the name. That's a big difference from making fun of anybody. We want to play a game with the name, but it's our private game. We're not going to go to somebody and insult them or give them a hard time about it. Now, the first C is to create an image. And in my book, I've already created images for lots and lots of people's names. So if you go through my book, in the section on men's names, I'll have the name Al, and then next to it, Ale. And I'll go through it. I'll have Rob, and it'll be, to rob somebody, that you're a robber. And I'll go through, alphabetically all of these different men's names, and I do the same thing with women's names, and I do the same thing with last names. Last names are especially interesting. Last names are especially useful because many, many, many last names actually have to do with the profession that they may have come from. You'll talk to somebody who is named Cooper. Anybody know what a Cooper is?
No.
It's a barrel maker. And so you're going to wind up expanding your knowledge about what things are. A Cooper. You might think it's somebody that builds chicken coops. Could be. Or a carpenter. So a baker. Taylor. Absolutely. Fisher. And so you start to take a look at people's last names. And again, sometimes you're not going to have any sort of a real picture. But it's not unusual to already know somebody with the last name. You went to school with somebody with that very similar name. So you're looking to create the image. Now, the one thing we didn't talk about last week was the next C, and that is to connect. You're going to connect the picture that you made for their name. And I use the word image very loosely. I use the image loosely. Sometimes it's more of a sound picture. It's something that you can remember because of the way it sounds. I told you the story about somebody that I knew from New Jersey, Mr. Cianci. And not everybody was here that night, but Mr. Cianci named his daughter. Anybody that was here remember what Mr. Cianci named his daughter? Nancy Ann. Say her name.
Nancy Ann Cianci.
Nancy Ann Cianci. What a cruel joke. That was a wacky thing to do. But how are you ever going to forget that? Nancy Ann Cianci. Can you imagine in 2nd grade the torture that this girl must have gone through?
Absolutely.
So, I knew somebody who is an Irishman. His last name was spelled Hore, H-O-R-E. It's an Irish name. It's a very common Irish name. But coming to the United States and raising a family with a couple of daughters, he was not about to put his daughters through that kind of pain. And so he changed his last name to O'Hare. That's the importance of a name, because all of a sudden he's looking at his own name that he grew up with. And he went, different culture, different circumstances. I am not going to put my daughters through that. Changed his name legally before his daughters were old enough to really know what was going on, before they got made fun of in school. So, in connecting the images, my image for Melissa is molasses. Now, it's just a name that sounds like Melissa. Now, the reason that I'm happy to be using your name is because it's also the name of the head librarian here. And she has long, red, very wavy hair. So when I first met her, my picture was to put molasses into her long red hair. Now, long red hair is not one of the features that we talked about. Last week we talked about eyes and noses and ears and eyebrows and chins and teeth. But certainly you can do hair. One of the other fellas that works here at this library, now his name happens to be Curtis. So my observation of some of his facial features, and now I'm going to connect. I don't need to create an image, because I've already got a buddy of mine, one of the lead singers in one of the bands that I play in. His name is Curtis. So I already know somebody with the name Curtis. I've already observed the feature, and I can go, all right, when I see that, I know that's the guy that reminds me of my bandmate. That's what my connection is. The first night we came, we met somebody at the front desk that told you where the room was. His name is Dominic. And you said, oh, Dominic, but I know this story about pizza, right? Now, I don't know that story. Now, for me, Dominic has a completely different connection. But certainly Dominic, I could think of Domino's Pizza. I mean, the Dom part is, the Domin part is still similar. Remember, the connection only needs to make sense to you. Sometimes these connections are going to be wacky, and you're not going to be able to explain your connection to somebody else. So there's a story about Will Rogers. And Will Rogers was fantastic being able to remember people's names. So one time he meets this woman who's very heavy. And she's got a great big stomach. And her last name was Hummock. And so he went, okay, well, this is going to be easy. He went, stomach, Hummock. She's got a big stomach. Her name is Hummock. Piece of cake. Got it. A week goes by. He sees her the next time and he says, hello, Mrs. Kelly. What's the joke? Kelly Belly.
Kelly Belly.
You see, sometimes that's why the last part of the formula is so important. And that's repeat. You've got to repeat the image. If you just make the picture one time, you may or may not remember it. You may remember it for, to be able to get you through the cocktail party, but you may not be able to remember it for longer than that. So, get the name. And let me tell you, if this is the only thing you do, if you really focus on getting the name, all the rest of this stuff is just superfluous. Because if you really take the time to get the name and you pay close attention and you care about the person and you make an effort, just doing this one thing is going to make a world of difference. But if you're meeting 290 people, if you're starting a new job, if you're going to have 2 or 3 dozen clients, if you're meeting 54 people on a new camp, now it's a new game. Now what you're really doing is you're paying close attention to what makes one person's face different than another. you're going to have some sort of an image for that name. And remember, here are the ways to make a picture of the name. You already know somebody with that same name. And so, if I meet somebody named Mark, well, my brother's name is Mark. I just recently, when my floors were being done at my house, I checked into a hotel for the weekend so that the family would be able to get a break away from the workmen being in our house for the weekend. And the guy who checked us in at the hotel, his name was Mark. Well, that was 2 weeks ago that this guy checked me, and I still remember his name. Why? Because it was such an obvious connection. It was such an obvious thing. I mean, just like my brother, piece of cake to remember it. I didn't have to work at it at all. So, you observe something about him. Now, this young fella happened to he was about my height. So we were at eye level with each other. And the next thing is he wore a military style haircut. And I asked him, are you in the military? He said no, which surprised me because he was like, got a buzz cut like a Marine.
High and tight.
Yeah, exactly. He was high and tight. So the first thing is you already know somebody with that same name. It could be somebody from the comics, it could be somebody from a famous book, it could be somebody from the movies, it could be a relative, a friend, somebody that you've read about in magazines, it could be a famous actor or actress, but you already know somebody with that name. Just put them together, see them together, interchange the two of them. The second way is the name sounds like something else. And that was kind of like what we did when we played the game where, what do you call a guy with no arms and no legs and a pile of leaves? Russell. Well, the name Russell, it's the sound of the name, all right? You know, well, what do you call a guy with no arms and no legs and a pot on your stove? Stew. Now, so you make a picture out of that because it sounds like that. All right. The third way to make a picture with somebody's name is you rhyme it. And so rhyming, you know, we've used the expression rhyme or reason. It has no rhyme or reason. So Keith has nice teeth. Bob is no slob. So you can go on and do all that schoolyard type stuff. And the fourth one is what? What's the fourth way to make a picture of somebody's name? We've got the name sounds like something else. You can rhyme the name. You know somebody with the name. Easy. The name is a thing. The name already is something. So, a mark. What is a mark? Well, you put a mark on the board. Mat. What is a mat? Well, it's a welcome mat. Okay. Did I tell you the story about the Hispanic couple that the husband came into the room after the wife had twins and he wasn't available and his brother named the children and he said, "Sweetheart, I see that my brother named the kids." And she went, "Yes, he named our daughter Denise." And he went, "Denise, what a lovely name. What did he name our son?" "The nephew." Or the King family. Do you remember I told you about the King family? And the husband came into the room and he discovered that his wife had named their son Nosmo. And she said, and he said to her, "Nosmo, what an unusual name. How did you come up with that?" She said, "I didn't. They had a sign over the bed." And he looked up over the bed and it said Nosmoking. No smoking.
Nosmo King.
Nosmo King. Or the Hispanic couple that had a little baby girl. The husband came in and said, "Oh, you named our daughter Famali. What a beautiful name." She says, "I didn't name him, the hospital named her." And he looked at the birth certificate and sure enough, Female. Famali. Or the Chinese couple that in the nursery were handed a little Caucasian baby. And they went, "Hold on a second, we are Mr. and Mrs. Wong, this is not our child." And the nurse said, "No, Mr. Wong, this is your child. And I went, no, we're Chinese. This baby's white. And she says, no, Mr. and Mrs. Wong, this is your baby. And he said, no. Two Wongs don't make a white. But they eventually convinced them that it was their baby. So they took the baby home and named the baby Something. Something Wong. Now, I didn't write any of those jokes. But this is what people do with each other's names. And that's why you play a game with the name. Have a laugh, look at the name in a different way than you normally do. You with Super Mario, perfect. It was easy for you to do it that way. And as you're going along, that's what we're looking to do. So, get the name, observe the features, create an image for the name, connect it to the person, look to connect it maybe to those features. If they have a distinctive nose or ears or eyebrows or whatever, look to make that connection so that when you see them, you look at their face and you go, oh yeah, I remember I put a ski pole on her head because the guy's last name was Polanski. Or Mr. Trubulkowski. You look at him and he's got this weird part in his hair. And so you put a troubled cow that's gone water skiing through the part in his hair. Trubulkowski. And you can now come up with these oddball, silly pictures that'll keep you entertained, but it'll also make you look like a star to these people because you actually took the time to figure out how you're going to remember them. Does this take a little practice? Yeah, it does. The part that doesn't take practice is the first step. But as long as you're doing the rest of this, get in the habit of doing a little bit each person that you meet. Play a game with their name and see where it takes you. Amen.
Amen.